Welcome to Church Online. My name is Nate, and I'm the family pastor here at South Hills Church Corona. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you find a place to connect and feel like you can belong here. We believe that we are the perfect place for imperfect people, all of us alike. And if you would like to get connected and maybe talk to a pastor or get some prayer or take a next step, we'd invite you to fill out the Connect card. You can text the word "What's Next" to 94000, and a digital card will be sent to you. You can fill it out. It's the best way to kind of get involved and find out a little bit more about what it is that we do at this church. But I hope that you are ready to receive a great word in the message today in the sermon. But before we do, let's go to God and worship. Prepare your hearts. Let's worship together.
Down
a great way to start the morning, or whenever you're watching this, to worship God and sing along. I hope that this day is something that is exactly what you need to hear. And Adam has got a great message for us. But before we do, wanted to talk about a couple things happening around South Hills in the coming weeks. We are continuing our Souls for Souls drive, collecting new and gently used shoes. You can drop them off at the church offices on Tuesdays from 10 to 4, as well as at our in-person services that are happening on Sundays. And over the next few weeks, we're collecting these to partner with this organization to make a difference in the lives of families across this globe, break the cycle of poverty. And so please consider being a part of this. One of the other things that we have coming up also is growth groups. You know, we really do believe that we grow better in circles than in rows or even online. And I hope that you can find a place to connect with other people to support you and walk alongside you in life. And if that's you and you'd like to connect with somebody new, I'd invite you to get into one of these growth groups. A lot of them are launching the week of February 14th. They are all on our Church Center app if you click on the groups tab. And if one of those don't fit, we would love to find out what can work for you to connect. And we regularly are adding different groups and putting people together to help them grow and connect in this church. And so thank you for joining us. Finally, we have a unique opportunity for maybe you sitting at home, how you can serve and be a part of this church. We are looking for people to be online hosts to help continue to make this online experience even better. And if you're interested in doing that, and really it just doesn't take any special skills or training, but your willingness to kind of help us out, then we'd love to connect with you to Ashley, our online communications apprentice. She will walk you through what that looks like. And so you can email her at ashley.barrett@southhills.org, or fill out that Connect card and let us know through there. And we'd love to get you plugged in to make a difference in the lives of others. But right now, we want you to open up your notebook or phone, whatever it is, and prepare your heart as we step into the message that Adam's got for you. You're in for a treat.
Come closer. I'm going to tell you an astounding story.
Just remember who's boss around here.
I was tussling with the most dangerous animal in the world. A woman.
Yeah, I killed him. I killed him for money and for a woman.
I hate you too, Johnny.
I'm through trusting you, the police, or anybody but me.
I think you're kidding.
Make her stop.
No, I was just tossing away my frustration.
For him, there was no way out.
I just want to welcome you once again to Church Online. My name is Adam, and I'm the campus pastor here at our South Hills Corona campus. And you are tuning in today for our very first week of this brand new series we're going to be in all month long called How to Kill a Relationship. A lot of us, we recognize that maybe we're not the greatest at relationships. Maybe we didn't grow up in an environment where we had a lot of great examples or were handed a lot of really great tools. But at the same time, we don't always understand why things aren't working out. And the whole question behind this series is like, what if you could figure out what was killing your relationships before they died? What if you could change some things right now that would change the trajectory of your relationship long term? I think a lot of us, we want to fall in love. We want to stay in love. We don't want to just stay together, but we want to actually make it through a lot of years together and end up happy on the other side of them. How do you do that? How do you make things work? I'm going to give you over the course of these 4 weeks the top 4 killers of our relationships, and hopefully you can see like how to save your relationship before it's too late. And so I want to encourage you to take some notes today. Write down some things that stand out to you that you feel like might help you. And if you are taking notes, the title of my message today, which is also the first way to kill a relationship, is communicate in code. Now, my daughter Tegan just turned 13 years old. So she's officially a teenager now. And of course, there are like some perks that come along with being a teenager, at least in my house, and maybe they did in your house growing up too. And one of those perks for her is that she gets a little bit more of an extended bedtime. And so instead of having to go to bed right when her little brothers do, who share a room together, she gets to stay up a little bit later. And a lot of times what she wants to do with that time is to stay up and watch not kid movies. And of course, like her favorite thing that she has recently discovered that she didn't really know until she turned 13 and realized there was this whole world of movies outside of like the Disney Channel G-rated things, and that is rom-coms. And I gotta tell you, she is smitten. Like she loves it. She can't get enough of it. And a lot of times, you know, my wife falls asleep like really early into the evening. So it ends up just being like me and Tegan just sort of like cuddling and giggling together about whatever rom-com we happen to be watching at the moment. And one thing that Tegan has figured out, that you have probably figured out, is that, you know, basically every conflict that happens in a rom-com could be solved in the first few minutes with a single honest conversation. Like oftentimes it's just some weird miscommunication. Two people are just missing each other. Like there's this tension that could be almost immediately eliminated if these two people sat down and just cleared the air. Oh, I thought, oh no, wait, you're not having an affair, that's your sister. Okay, that's the plot of half of them. I'm sorry for the spoiler alerts, but that is what it is. Now, you know, when you hear this, and maybe even when you sit down or get suckered into watching a romantic comedy, the whole plot seems absurd. But the thing that I want to just mention and get you thinking about is like, isn't this kind of true of real life too? Like a lot of our issues, our conflicts, our frustrations, a lot of the relational havoc that's happening could be cleared up with better communication, but we don't realize that we're not communicating well. I think a lot of times we think we're communicating, but we're mostly filtering and assuming. In other words, like what's being said is not always what's being heard. When someone else is talking, most of us aren't listening as much as we're translating, right? We're translating what they're saying into what we assume they're meaning. And then 9 out of 10 times we move forward with our interpretation without seeking any clarification because we assume we're correct. I'm betting that you do this. I know I do this. We had a moment a couple weeks ago where right after dinner, my wife was like, hey, maybe, you know, she was kind of looking at me like, hey, I want to tell you something I don't want the kids to hear or know about, which always is like a little exciting. And I'm like, she's like, hey, later, do you want to like, And she made this like face and I'm like, yeah. And she's like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, definitely. And she's like, okay, because it has been on my mind all day. And I was like, okay, all right. And then she's like, all right. And then she's kind of like doing some dance moves. And I'm just like, I don't know what's cooking, but something amazing. And so it gets time for bed. And like, I'm hurrying the kids through like brushing their teeth and getting in their pajamas. And Gretchen tucks the boys in and then she goes and tucks Tegan in. And then I tuck Tegan in and then I go to tuck the boys in. And by the time I get back to our room, I'm just like, I have no idea what is waiting me on the other side of this door, but I'm excited. And I open the door. And as soon as I open the door, I walk in. My wife walks around the corner in full-on pajamas and not sexy pajamas. You should know that my wife, when she says pajamas, is like the big oversized flannel pajama bottoms and like an old sweatshirt and that's been through the wash a few too many times and it's already 3 times too big for her. And she has her hair up. She had a face mask on. She had her retainer in and she walked out of the closet area and dumped 3 giant laundry baskets of clean laundry on the bed and was like, I have been waiting for this all day. And I was a little confused because as it turns out, we were not on the same page. That is not what I thought she was talking about when she was like, hey, you want to later? I thought she was talking about something different. Now you probably have these moments in your life and relationships too. And like for us, we just laughed about it, like this moment where we just totally missed each other. But these moments, they aren't always funny. Like, in fact, sometimes they're deeply wounding. We're so caught off guard sometimes in a moment in which we feel completely misunderstood that oftentimes our knee-jerk reaction just sort of makes things worse. And nobody's laughing and nobody's enjoying the moment. Nobody thinks that it's just a cute misunderstanding. And in that moment, we feel even more estranged and more disconnected than we did a few minutes before. And this is an issue that has to be addressed in every single relationship. Renowned relationship expert Dr. John Gottman, he can predict whether a couple will get divorced with 94% accuracy by just watching how they talk out a disagreement for less than 3 minutes. And this is regardless of what the discussion or the disagreement was actually about. Because the thing that he and his team over years and years of research have discovered is that most couples' problems are communication problems masked as something else. Like, we think that the problem is the thing that we're fighting about, but and a lot of times it's the way in which we're fighting. It's the fact that we're not really communicating, that we underestimate how much filtering and assuming is happening behind the scenes. And this has always been true. In fact, this week, I want to make a few points about relationships and about what it looks like to communicate in code by rolling things back to the Old Testament. I want to highlight a character that you may have heard of or be somewhat familiar with, but I'm going to look at a different part of the story than maybe you are familiar with. We're going to be in the book of Judges here in just a moment, and we're going to look at the life of Samson. Some of you are like, this is ringing a bell. Strong, muscular guy, and there was Delilah, and she cut his hair. Then it's like there's a flannel graph and everything. But I don't want to talk about Delilah. In fact, we're not even going to go there. We're going to look at the story before that piece of the story. And I want to bring you in on a story about Samson and his first wife and some of the insanity that happened between the two of them. It's found in Judges chapter 14, verse 1. One day, when Samson was in Timnah, one of the Philistine women caught his eye. And when he returned home, he told his father and mother, a young Philistine woman in Timnah caught my eye. He's very literal, this Samson, right? Very just down to the details, the bullet points. He doesn't need to paint a picture, not interested. I want to marry her. Get her for me. This is hilarious to me. Like, he'd seen her. He'd maybe spent a few moments near her, maybe with her. We don't really know for sure. We definitely know because of what happens later. He hadn't had any in-depth conversations with her, and yet he is convinced, I am gonna marry this girl. And I think we sort of do this in our culture too. We see something we like and we want it. We just don't tell our parents, right? We tell an app. We swipe right. It's our way of just saying, get her for me. And the first thing I want you to understand about communication is, I think part of the reason communication falls apart in a relationship is because it's not the foundation of the relationship. Most romantic relationships get off the ground because you think they're attractive and you're aroused. Is that too honest? I don't know. Maybe that's too much. You want them, or you want to be wanted by them, and so you go all in. And this was certainly true with Samson. And man, I think a lot of us make a lot of irrational decisions based on the thing we'll spend the least amount of time doing together. Even if you're doing it a lot, it still probably only equates to 0.01% of the time that you have together. The rest of the time in the relationship isn't spent on sexy stuff. It's spent on how are we gonna pay the rent? And who's gonna pick up the kids tomorrow? And will you go on this diet with me? And did you put the clothes in the dryer? And somebody needs to buy dog food, and it's gotta be the special kind for the prescription because of his allergies. Whose family are we gonna go spend Christmas with? And if we go there for Christmas, then we have to go over here for Thanksgiving, or else you're gonna have to tell somebody this thing that we don't wanna have to tell them. Should we loan your brother this money? Because sometimes I feel like maybe he's a drug addict. Can we even afford this car? Should we lease it? Should we buy it? Should we buy something else? Should we wait till later? Should we just carpool? Are we gonna hang out with your friends on Friday night, or is it just gonna be the two of us? Because I kind of know what I wanna do, but I'm not really sure what you wanna do. What are we gonna do about your ex? Okay, because they are crazy, and I feel like they're gonna ruin our lives. Is our son old enough for a cell phone? Is our daughter old enough to date? What show should we binge? That's probably the king question right there. This is what occupies most of a relationship. But I think a lot of us, when we get into a relationship, we just think like, well, I'll figure all that stuff out later. All I know is I don't want to be alone and they're cute. And we do this because, we want to believe enough attraction will compensate for our lack of communication. And even though a lot of us do this, anyone who's been in a relationship, including you, for longer than a few months would tell you that never works out. So we end up bailing on that relationship and we jump right into another one. And usually we end up making the same mistake again and again and again. But enough about you, back to Samson. When Samson arrived back in Timnah, apparently his dad did go get her for him and now they're going to get married. He talked with the woman and was very pleased with her. They're engaged, and this is the first record we have of any conversation that they've had. Like, it actually doesn't even say that they had a conversation. It says that he talked to her and was pleased. By what? Like, that while he talked, she smiled and listened and walked away without saying a word and having, opinions. Yikes. Then he just leaves. Like, this is the extent of their interaction together. Now, before you get all bent out of shape and jump to conclusions and assume that you hear what I'm not saying here, I want you to know that this is not necessarily a male-female thing. I think most relationships have what I would call a stuffer and a steamroller, right? There's one who overshares, and then there's one who rarely shares. And the result is often a romance where one person thinks like, our relationship is so great, we talk all the time. And the other one thinks, our relationship is horrible. They talk all the time. Now, these tendencies are less about what we want to do and more about what we've been conditioned to do. Like, a lot of us are functioning in our current relationship however we have learned that we feel like we have to function in order to feel safe with another person. But the issue is, like, we may not be at all self-aware enough to know who's who. Like, I think a lot of steamrollers think they're great listeners, and they're not. How well you listen is determined by how heard the other person feels, not how hard you feel like you're trying. But here's the question for you. Like, when was the last time you checked in with the people around you to see if they really felt heard by you? Back to Samson. Later, when he returned to Timnah for the wedding, he turned off the path to look at the carcass of a lion. Now, we've all been here, right? It's a curious thing, the carcass of a lion. And he found that a swarm of bees had made some honey in the carcass. And so he scooped out some of the honey into his hands and he ate it. He also gave some to his father and mother and they ate it, but he didn't tell them he had taken the honey from the carcass of a lion, which, I mean, kind of makes sense. Most people wouldn't want to eat honey they knew came from a dead lion's body. I get that. But there's more going on in this part of the story than just that. Samson, in particular, had taken this sacred oath never to touch a dead body, among other things. It's called the Nazirite vow. And so telling them where he got this mystery honey would have been admitting, I knowingly compromised my integrity to get what I wanted. And he doesn't want to tell them that because he doesn't even want to admit that to himself. And this is part of where things begin to go sideways. As the AA saying goes, you're only as sick as your secrets. The problem is a lot of relationships run on secrets. That's a lot of sickness, which is why a lot of our relationships are super unhealthy and often on the verge of death. Because the reality is we hide bad habits when we fear their short-term disappointment more than our long-term destruction. We have this sense of like, you know, I'd rather risk wrecking our whole relationship than suffer the pain of momentarily hurting their feelings or experiencing their frustration. And I gotta tell you, like, that is a terrible trade-off, but it's one that Samson makes over and over and over again. As his father was making final arrangements, Samson threw a party at Timnah, as was the custom for elite young men. When the bride's parents saw him, they selected 30 young men from the town to be his companions. Does anything seem weird about that to you? Like, it's strange that he's like provided companions. Like, he has no companions. He's assigned companions. They throw this party that elite young men throw, but he has no one to invite. Because the reality of these two people is they don't know each other well enough to have any mutual friends. And this sort of thing, I think, still exists in our culture. Like, we all want to have this Instagram-worthy occasion in our lives, but most of us don't have enough friends to include in the celebration. And so it all ends up just being for show, which ends up feeling hollow because all we have are the pictures of something that didn't happen the way that we're presenting it. I gotta tell you, like, a healthy couple needs mutual friends to navigate their relationship well. Like, the Achilles heel of a lot of relationships is people getting or giving bad advice because they're only seeing or hearing one side of the story. But if you have mutual friends who like know both of you and they can observe your relationship up close, then you have a better chance of getting honest, more accurate feedback. But this is why a lot of people want to separate their friends out, whether they do it consciously or subconsciously, because in our minds, we're like, oh, well, I can tell I'm my partner to you and you'll always take my side because you'll never get to hear or see their side. And the benefit is I'll never have to grow. I'll never have to be stretched or challenged by you. I can always just be as I am and expect for them to change to be what I want them to be. The story of Samson goes on in verse 12. It says, Samson said to them, all these guys that were assigned to him, let me tell you a riddle. If you solve my riddle during the 7 days of the celebration, I'll give you 30 fine linen robes and 30 sets of festive clothing. But if you can't solve it, then you must give me 30 fine linen robes and 30 sets of festive clothing. All right, they agreed. Let's hear your riddle. Now, there's some cultural, contextual stuff going on here with the way wedding gifts worked and all that. But there's a whole weird dynamic that has nothing to do with their culture and everything to do with human nature. No one is saying what they actually mean. Like, these guys hate Samson, and he feels like he's being taken advantage of by them. And so they make this passive aggressive request of him, and he responds with a riddle. So many games. Like, isn't this what we all hate about relationships? The game playing. So why do we all also do a lot of it? Why do we do this thing where we sort of cover over on the surface everything that's going on deep down? Because when we do, we settle for artificial harmony at the expense of true intimacy. Like, the part of us that the other person is falling for or connecting to isn't really entirely us because we're hiding our true selves. And so the intimacy that we experience is built on a facade. And the reason we do this is because we don't want to wade through the uncomfortability of getting to the truth. Because we tell ourselves, you know, I can't say, I got to protect their feelings. I mean, I don't know how I don't want to cause a scene. Okay. Like, I mean, listen, yeah, that's going on inside of me, but saying it out loud isn't going to change anything anyway. And I'm sure like over time, it's just going to resolve itself. Does that ever happen? I mean, think about this logically. I mean, even though we tell this to ourselves, how many times has this actually happened to you? Like, where the person you're in a relationship with has this solo epiphany and intuitively realizes all your unspoken frustrations, wants, needs, and desires. And without you having to say anything, they respond accordingly without any prompting and do everything you ever hoped they would do without being told where or how to do it. It sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. But how many of us, like, that's what we want? And not even want, like, this is what we expect. We hold each other accountable for what's in our head, not for what was actually said. It's like we have all of these pent up, unspoken frustrations, and they end up fracturing our relationships. because no matter how hard we try and mask it, the truth always seeps out. Whatever is in your heart ends up coming out your mouth or your body language, your tone, your attitude, your eye contact. And the longer we avoid having these crucial conversations, the harder they get to have, and the worse we tend to make things between us in the meantime. And so what we do is, to avoid the tension of speaking truth in love, we settle for lying, small talk, game playing, ultimatums, threats, emotional manipulation, passive aggression, nagging, insults, gossiping, raging, stonewalling. And that's what's happening here in this story. We already saw Samson lying. We already saw like these little small talk moments where nobody is really going deep below the surface. We've already seen game playing and like riddle making, right? But it only gets worse from here. It only gets much, much darker. On the fourth day, they said to Samson's wife, "Entice your husband to explain the riddle for us, or we'll burn down your father's house with you in it." That's a little extreme. Did you invite us to this party just to make us poor? So Samson's wife came to him in tears and said, "You don't love me. You hate me. You've given my people a riddle and you haven't told me the answer." "I haven't even given the answer to my father and mother," he replied. "Why should I tell you?" So she cried whenever she was with him and kept it up for the rest of the entire celebration. At last, on the seventh day, he told her the answer because she was tormenting him with her nagging. Then she went and explained the riddle to the others. This is maybe why he didn't want to tell her. Samson was furious and he went back home to live with his parents. He'll show her, move back in with mom and dad. So his wife was given in marriage to the man had been Samson's best man at the wedding, who again was not a friend of his. It was someone that was assigned to him by the village. There is so much dysfunction here packed into so few verses. It's astonishing. Like everything that we were saying that people do to avoid having healthy conversation, all of these people do in these handful of sentences. Like Samson gives an ultimatum, then they like threaten her, then she emotionally manipulates him by crying and like exaggerating the situation. Then he responds passive aggressively and is just like, "I shouldn't have to tell you." And then she nags him until he tells her later. And then Samson insults the entire wedding party. And then they both go and they gossip about each other to other people instead of talking it out between the two of them. And then he rages when he doesn't get his way and then stonewalls her by leaving the relationship and never talking to her again. Like these people need to go to couples counseling. I get that this is like an exaggerated ancient example, but doesn't this feel like uncomfortably similar to the situations we frequently find ourselves in? And if the answer is yes, like what do we do about it? In the New Testament, so many of the writers clue us into how communicating like Jesus can rescue our relationships. And what I want to do, I just want to read you a few verses and give you a series of questions that you can ask yourself or have like a close confidant ask you to steer your communication into a healthy zone with your core relationships, especially with your romantic relationship. And I want to start with something that Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 37. Just say yes and no. When you manipulate words to get your own way, you go wrong. So here's the question. And I'll warn you ahead of time, you're not going to like any of these questions because they force you to be honest about some things about yourself that you may not like. And the first question out of this comment by Jesus is this: how might you be emotionally manipulating this situation to try and get your own way? Ugh. Like, what's your version of manipulation? Because we've all got some version that's our go-to. Like, do you pout? Do you punish them by refusing to talk? Do you withhold affection? Do you rage on them and leverage intimidation? Like, do you passive aggressively like prod them? Do you nag them about the same issue over and over and over and over again until they finally break? Like, can you admit to yourself when you are using immature tactics to try and win? The second thing I want to read you is something that is credited to having been written by the Apostle Paul. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15, he says this, "Speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ." So there's a couple things here. There's speaking with truth and love. And so I want to give you two questions. The first is the truth question, and it's this. Are you hiding something that you've done or how you really think and feel? Like, are there conversations you're avoiding? Like, do you find yourself lying? Like, even about things that you don't have to or don't even really want to? Do you find yourself sticking to small talk, stuffing your feelings, trying to distract them from the deep stuff, or minimizing their feelings because you don't want to have to deal with them or you don't feel the same way? And here's the other side of it. Here's the love question from that same verse. Are you communicating your point of view with calmness and kindness? Like, some of us are like, I tell the truth always in my relationships. Good for you. But how are you doing that? Like, do you share your opinions and your perspective by attacking them, accusing them, insulting them, or threatening them if they don't see things your way or do things your way or come around to the way you want things done? The other thing I want to read you is also from the book of Ephesians. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. And here's the question I want to give you from this. Is what you want to share likely to help them be better or just help you feel better? Like, is it a constructive conversation for both of you to have? Or do you just want to do it so that you can vent, so that you can tell them off, so that you can put them in their place, so that you can guilt them or lecture them? Because those things don't really come from a loving place and don't tend to help people move forward. And here's the question that I want to pose to you, because I think if Samson would have honestly asked himself these questions, his relationships would have gone in a totally different direction, but he didn't. And I wonder, like, what if you took these things? Like, what if you typed them into your phone or wrote them into your journal? And what if you used them to check your communication impulses in your relationships? Like, all your relationships. Like, what if you went even a step further? What if you like sent them to a few close friends, like those really core people to your life, and you asked them to help you? I wonder what would happen with your work relationships, with your neighbors, with your extended family. I wonder what would happen inside of your romantic relationship. Because the truth of the matter is, they're fun to watch, but you can be better than a romantic comedy. You can be better than Samson, and you should be. But you can't be without God's wisdom and God's Spirit helping you to apply that wisdom, and a community of people who are willing to stand with you and walk with you forward as you uproot your default settings and you decide to move forward and follow God into something new, a new way of being, a new way of talking, and definitely a new way of listening. And this is my prayer for you, that you wouldn't allow this to kill your relationships, because God has something better for you. And that's what I want to pray into your life today, that you would leverage these questions from these verses that were spoken to the first church, and that you would apply them to your life, and you would watch what happens as God begins to change the course of your relationships by changing the course of your conversations. Would you bow your heads with me wherever you are, and let's pray together. God, thank you so much for the lives that you have given us and for the relationships that you have gifted us with. God, all of us are surrounded with some sort of relational connection, whether it is close friends, whether it's coworkers, whether it's just like our parents and siblings at this stage of our life, whether it's somebody that we're dating or somebody that we're married to. But not all of us have been handed great relational tools. And some of us feel completely lost. We have not really gotten to see up close a marriage that worked well. We haven't gotten to see in real life, a relationship that we would want to mimic. And this is where your word and your wisdom comes alongside us to show us the Jesus way of doing things. And God, I pray that you wouldn't allow communicating in code to kill our core relationships. God, we know that you gifted us with the relationships in our life, not just to make us happy, but to help us become holy, to help us become more like you by getting to see through our relationships some of our unhealthy patterns that pull us down, that hold us back from who you've designed us to be and what you've designed us to get out of life. And God, I pray that during this series, not just as we hear these things, but as we apply these things, as we invite your Holy Spirit to lead and guide us in every single conversation, to have these conversations your way, not ours. And God, in doing so, may you revolutionize our relationships. God, may you revitalize and maybe even in some cases resurrect our romance. Because when we do things your way, life gets better, relationships work better, and we become who we are truly meant to be. God, make it so in your name, Jesus. Amen. Well, today, as I was teaching, maybe there was something that struck a chord with you, and it was something bigger than just maybe these few points or these questions. Maybe it was something bigger in life in general, because you've never really thought about God as this loving being who wants what's best for you, who wants to lead and guide you, not because he wants to control you, but because he ultimately wants you to be free. He wants you to experience life in the way that it was created to be lived, life to the full. And maybe you've tried to do everything your way, like not just relationships, but like the way you've made career decisions, the way that you've decided where to live or how to spend your money. You've sort of done everything your way. And maybe today you're thinking like, man, I don't know if this is working. I'm ready to surrender my life to something bigger and wiser than me. I'm ready to surrender my life to doing things God's way. And if that's where you're at, we call this saying yes to Jesus, deciding to place the person and the sacrifice and the way of Jesus at the center of our lives to lead us forward. And if that's a place that you're at today and you want to make that commitment or just learn more about it, we want to hear from you, because we want to walk alongside of you in your journey with Jesus. And you can let us know by simply texting "what's next" to the number on the bottom of your screen, and a Connect card is going to be sent back to you. You can fill that out, and then one of our team members will contact you and talk to you about what's next for you. Your journey with Jesus is going to be unique to you, but we don't want you to walk it alone. And the last thing I want to invite you to do with us today is to give with us. There are all sorts of ways to give with us here at South Hills, and your giving fuels us being able to do ministry, including putting out this digital content for you and being able to hold in-person services, classes, provide counseling, and do so many different community outreaches. Your giving is what makes it all possible. And so today I want to just remind you once again to make this a priority on a consistent basis in your life. You need this habit, not for what it does for us, but for what it does for you in the confines of your soul. God uses these disciplines in our lives to make us more like him and to allow us to see that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves. And so today, as you give, maybe through our website, maybe through the Church Center app, through our text to give function, or by mailing in your gift or bringing it by the office during our office hours, I just want to say thank you so much for all that you have empowered us to do. Thank you for entrusting us with your resources. And I can't wait to share even more stories with you of all that God is doing in and through your giving. We love you guys. We're excited for you to tune in next week to keep tabs on this series as we continue to talk about how to kill a relationship so that hopefully when you know how it's done, you don't have to do it anymore. We'll see you next week.
For watching. I really do hope that something that you heard was exactly what you needed. And we want to come alongside you to resource you and help you along in a step that maybe you need to take this week. And so I'd invite you to fill out that Connect card by clicking the link in the description or texting the word "What's Next," all one word, to 94000. And somebody from our team will follow up with you and help you and guide you through whatever that next step might be. But thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you next week, but also make sure that you like, subscribe, share this video with somebody that might need to hear it as well. And have a great week. See you guys soon.